Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sips and Tips with Whiskey Nick. I'm your host, Nick Jasinski, and I'm a spirits expert at Global Wine and Spirits in Amherst, New York. Last time, we talked about how the proper glassware can help enhance our whiskey experience. Some of you may not know, but whiskey is a very broad category, which includes Scotch whiskey, Irish whiskey, Japanese, Canadian, and American whiskey that also includes bourbon. So, let's start with the dictionary definition of whiskey. Whiskey is an alcohol distilled from a fermented mash of grains. That fermented mash of grains is often referred to as distiller's beer. In my personal edition, it is then aged in oak barrels for a designated amount of time. Now we're going to start with Scotch. Scotch comes from Scotland and is made with barley. It's generally twice distilled, and for some reason, they forget the E when they spell whiskey. Scotch has minimal to no aging restrictions and is often aged in ex-bourbon barrels. Next, we have Irish whiskey. If it's not obvious, it comes from Ireland, but they chose to keep the E in whiskey. It's also made from barley, but it is generally 3 times distilled, which is the biggest difference from Scotch. It is similar to Scotch in its minimal aging restrictions, and it is also aged in ex-bourbon barrels. The last one we're going to talk about today is American whiskey. American whiskey is a broad category in itself, including corn whiskey, wheat whiskey, rye whiskey, and Tennessee whiskey. Each whiskey is identified by the primary grain in the mash. For example, 51% rye in a mash constitutes a rye whiskey, or 51% wheat constitutes a wheat whiskey. Bourbon, which is the most popular whiskey in America right now, is made up of 51% corn. It must be aged in new charred oak barrels and display an age statement for anything younger than 4 years old. The word straight means it's been aged for a minimum of 2 years, but also must maintain the age designation for anything less than 4 years. Since bourbon must be done in new charred oak barrels, they can only be used one time. This is why Scotch and Irish whiskeys often use ex-bourbon barrels. The words bottled and bond mean the bourbon must be aged for a minimum of 4 years at the same distillery within the same calendar year. It also must be bottled at 100 proof. For this reason, it creates the most consistent whiskey, in my opinion. Now it's time for Whiskey Nick's Whiskey of the Month. For this month, I've chosen Evan Williams Bottled and Bond. Let's taste some whiskey. Definitely a lot of sweet notes. Some kind of brown sugar and honey. And just a little bit of heat, and I even get some malt in there. Definitely some cherry vanilla on the palate. That brown sugar shines through. It's a little bit of heat, but not too much. It's pleasant. And definitely a little bit of orange peel on the back end. Just not too much heat, just a very pleasant drink. Get your bottle of Evan Williams Bottled and Bond at the exclusive Whiskey Nick discount price of $18.99 by taking a screenshot of the coupon at the end of this video. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And remember, it's because my name's Nick. And I like whiskey.